Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Road to 2K on chess.com. Today, we are once again reviewing our online classical games that we play in the Lichess leagues. This week, actually, we only had two of them. My lone wolf opponent, or the game I play 30 plus 30 in, we were unable to find a time. So we contact each other, we contact the moderators, and unfortunately that game just ends in a draw simply because we weren't able to coordinate our schedules this week. But for the first game of the day, I actually went ahead and I played Ham Sandwich. This is round 6 of the 45-45 league, and for the first time all season, I got the white pieces because me and the board above me have been switching back and forth every single week since the league started. I went into this game knowing that they were going to probably play a Caro Kann against me. That's been their most common. So I did some prep in the fantasy variation before the game to kind of make sure that I was familiar-ish with my lines, right? So, alas, I play e4, and we do get c6, so immediately I was feeling pretty much in my comfort zone. I was feeling good about what we had going on here. It's a little bit tricky sometimes, and we will turn on one line here. In this position, I went ahead and played d4. Our opponent played d5, and we went ahead and played f3, which is the fantasy variation. Now, the ideal part of the fantasy variation would be that they take the center, they strike back with e5, and I personally like to go for this gambit line where I go for very, very quick development. We're eyeing a lot of tempo or really a lot of attack on this f7 pawn. However, my opponent plays probably one of the most principled responses and simply plays e6, which creates this triangle defense, really just saying that they don't want us to come in. So theory in this position is actually just to play knight to c3, start getting these pieces out, potentially going for a queen-sided castle, and then a pawn storm on the king side. Now, after our opponent played knight to d7, pretty quickly I played bishop to e3, which is one of the main lines. a3 is a line I need to start working on here simply because it stops our opponent from playing bishop to b4 and having this pin. It's a little bit tricky, especially just dealing with this pin in general because you don't want to weaken the queen side too much if your plan is to castle here. But after bishop to e3, I'm not loving that, so we're going to take this back off. From this position, our opponent did play bishop to b4, which pins the knight to the king, makes it a little bit difficult to get our development around, and I was unsure of what I wanted to do next here. Ultimately, after not much thought, maybe about 45 seconds, I played queen to d2, which is, in some lines, the main variation. I think in this case, with the bishop being here, it does get a little bit scary, and there's a lot of tactics, particularly revolving around this knight. So I probably do need to be a little bit more careful with my opening prep here. Our opponent went ahead and captured the pawn on e4. We captured back, and you can see here from my time utilization that I did take a pause because I saw the idea of queen to h4 check coming in, and I was trying to figure out if I'm able to hold on to the center pawn, but I did remember, and I stopped and paused and thought that there are some lines in the in the fantasy variation where you give up this center pawn for development. So after f captures e4, my opponent took off the knight on c3. I captured back with the queen. Now, b captures c3 is technically a little bit of a better move, simply because it opens up this b file for us. We defend this pawn a little bit easier, and then even after the queen check, we are going to have to drop this pawn, but we'll try and do something a little bit more creative. I went queen captures c3. Our opponent went queen to h4, and here I forgot the theory, unfortunately. I was looking at moves like g3, which I immediately didn't like because of this capture and our rook. So I dismissed that one pretty quick. I was looking at king to e2, and after they take here, now potentially we bring the knight out to f3, or we even try, well, really, we can't even bring the light square bishop out because it's stuck behind all the pawns. So king to e2 didn't seem as good. King to d1, same thing, is once you get here, I don't know if I love the positions. I was probably looking at, once again, playing a move like knight to f3 here, just getting my development, potentially bringing this bishop out. So in the game, after queen to h4, I opted to play king to d2, trying to hold on to these two pieces, get them defended, get my king off the back rank, allow for this to fall, but then the rest of my pieces are going to come in. So our opponent did take on e4, and we can already see, a move like bishop to d3 gets very, very tricky after a queen captures g2. Knight comes in, and then the queen is a little bit offsides. We're going to play moves like rook to g1. So very likely, I think our opponent has to vacate the queen, or vacate the queen maybe to h3, to keep the queen really on the board. However, I played knight to f3. Our opponent played knight at g2. All right, I guess I should take a half step back here. After this move, the correct move in the position is bishop to f2, counterattacking the queen, giving up this with check. And then at that point, you're supposed to play knight to e2, potentially knight to g3, and develop from here. I panicked, and I looked at this variation, and I didn't see the compensation, but we can already see that our pieces are just much better placed. We are down the pawn, but this is still even-ish. So it's really a reminder to myself, especially in these online classical games, is not to panic. And really, I didn't take my time enough in this game, which bit me in the butt. So king to d2, queen captures e4, knight to f3, knight g to f6. And here I was trying to figure out a variation where we trap the queen. So I started with bishop to d3. Now the queen can't come to any of these squares. The only two moves is queen to d5, and the move which was played in the game, which is queen to g4. Here I played rook a to g1. I think technically I probably should have played a move like rook h to f1. And if my opponent takes this pawn, I come up with the rook, and then the second rook will follow. But instead, I played rook a to g1, thinking I'm going to try and push these two queenside or kingside pawns, and really just get some kind of attack going, trying to get compensation for the lost center pawn. And I completely overlooked knight to e4 check. I didn't see it. I was seeing, knight to d5, queen to b3, takes, and I wasn't quite sure what was happening in this position. I didn't love the position we ended up in. I was like, maybe this is playable. But yeah, just knight to e4 check didn't even cross my mind. And the only move here is bishop captures e4. You can't move the king because then you're just going to drop the queen. You can't, yeah. So after takes and queen takes, I don't know what I was thinking. Some days you don't play good chess. And I played g4. And I just hung the knight. And this one stung a little bit, I feel like I've had some really good games. Most seasons of the league I've played pretty well, and I think this season I'm sitting at 2 out of 6, with 2 draws, 1 win, and 4 losses or 3 losses. So this has not been a great season, but once again, I'm just kind of taking it as a learning opportunity to suck less and to try and play some better chess. So that's how the 45-45 game went this week. In the series game, I was playing Mr. Alex, and I actually had the black pieces this week. And going into the game, the only thing I knew is that my opponent is likely going to start with e4, and after c6, they do score pretty well. However, I didn't really know what I wanted to go for next here. So instead, after e4, I did in fact play c6, d4, d5, e captures, c captures, and c4. And I joked with my opponent prior to the game, probably a couple days before we played. I was like, hey man, are you going to hit me with that Panov? Because the last time that Alex and I had played, he played the same variation. And he kind of gave me a coy little response, and I knew that we were probably heading for this. So I did do a little bit of prep in the Panov. And after knight to f6, knight c3, g6, queen b3, bishop g7, c captures, we were actually in the exact same position that we were back in July, I think it was. In this position, you castle, you give up this center pawn, and the idea is once again that we have a ton of development, so we already see similarities in how we play from our series game to our 45-45 game. Here, my opponent played bishop to e2, and this is the first move that really caught me off guard. Is I wasn't sure what was going on in the previous game. What had happened was my opponent played bishop to c4, and after this, after knight b to d7, knight to f3, knight to b6, our opponent does have a few lines here. One of the more common ones is this bishop to f4, after which you can go takes, queen takes, and I believe the move is queen to b6. The position's fairly even. It's a little bit tricky to handle, but I was actually feeling pretty comfortable here because I played this position a few times. Instead, after bishop to e2, I played knight b to d7. My opponent played knight to h3, and at this point, I knew that my opponent had prepped something for me, and I had no idea where we were going next. So after quite some time, I was considering queen to b6 for quite a while with the idea if they take, we go here, and we have really nice pressure on this d5 pawn. However, after a move like queen to d1, defending the pawn, I didn't actually know where I was going here, and this knight felt kind of misplaced on d7, so I pretty quickly dismissed this idea. So I played knight to b6, putting more pressure on the center pawn. And my opponent played knight to f4. Now here, I think this was one of my first thoughts of the game was, I was like, well, what if I play the move g5? And my opponent goes back, and now they have two attackers here. So I'm probably forced to play a move like h6 to defend. And am I doing better here? And I thought I might be. It felt a little bit too aggressive to really weaken my king like this and to be pushing these pawns around my king. So I pretty quickly dismissed this. Instead, I went for bishop to f5, just going for pure development. My opponent castled. I played knight to e4. And knight to e4 is a little bit of a multifocal move. My bishop is now attacking the d4 square. I'm threatening a trade of the knights, and I'm trying to remove a defender so I can also win this d5 pawn. My opponent played a4, and I immediately saw that a4 and a5 is probably on the books. I did consider the move a5 here. I dismissed it, though, because I thought my knight just becomes too weak, and I don't see sufficient follow-up to actually do well here. So instead, I played bishop captures d4, which the engine immediately gives a blunder. My opponent punishes with a5, and I did see this variation. Like you can see, I spent 10 minutes on this move. After a5, my idea was initially first knight captures c3. I didn't like knight captures c3 after b captures c3 because now there's a tempo on my bishop and on my knight, and I'm going to be losing material here. So instead, I went for bishop captures c3 because now the knight is not under attack. My opponent took back here. If they would have taken back with a captures b6, I think the move I would have played in the game was bishop to g7, kind of preserving my bishop here. I think I could also probably play the move b captures a captures b6, which the engine once again does not like. Maybe even a move like bishop to e5, but as you can see, it's a very sharp position. I guess bishop to d4 is probably one of the best moves. Just putting some more pressure on this pawn. But instead, our opponent took back with the b pawn. So we played knight to d7, preserving our knight. And you can already see the evaluation bar has completely disagreed with how we're playing in this position. It does not appreciate what we've done. My opponent here played h4, kind of giving me a chance back in the game. And I opted to play queen c7, attacking this knight and really just trying to get my queen active, get my rooks connected, and maybe get something going. C4, and I played rook f to c8 to put an extra attacker on this weak c pawn. Now, All the pieces in my position are somewhat doing fine. I think one of the big contentions with playing rook f to c8 was I was actually quite worried if my opponent were to play the move g4. I didn't see a continuation that actually works here. I suppose I can probably go for bishop captures. And after bishop captures, I don't even have knight captures. So, really just kind of a flub there. Queen to b2, knight d to f6, reinforcing my knight, bishop to e3, knight to c5. And here, I'm really trying to stop the pawn from pushing through. I don't see many prospects for the knight here on e4. My opponent plays rook f to d1. I played knight to g4 coming into the position thinking I was actually doing something, and you can already see the evaluation bar drops to nearly a 5-point advance for my opponent with the material being even. My opponent snaps off the knight. I played bishop captures g4, and d6 comes on the board. This is probably the position where I realized that I was in a lot of trouble. I didn't see any suitable counterplay for myself. I immediately discounted the move e captures d6 because of the move knight to d5, threatening this check and threatening my queen. And I couldn't even find a good move. After queen to d8, knight f6 check, the king is forced over because otherwise there's a discovered check, and my opponent's going to pick up this bishop. So yeah, queen to d7, kind of getting in front of the pawn, asking them to see if they want to take. My opponent here played knight to d5, and here and only here, I played queen captures d6. There are discovered attacks with the knight. None of them do anything too particular. And the nice part now is actually this knight to f6 check doesn't work because we have queen captures f6. So after queen captures d6, my opponent played bishop to h6, cutting off squares around my king, looking for some kind of checkmating attack. Mate in 1 is threatened here. I played f6 to defend. I also vaguely considered e5, but I thought that this pawn is also just a little bit too weak for my liking here, and I didn't know what I was doing after the move f4. Apparently, this is just fine. I can probably just play a reinforcing move like f6. I certainly can't take because, like we talked about before, that just hangs checkmate in 1. But rook d4 comes in, attacking my bishop, and it's just a game I never had control over. I played bishop to d7, trying to restrict the knight, trying to get my bishop to an active square. Rook e1 comes in, and here I play the move e5, stopping the rook from infiltrating, counterattacking this rook. The rook can't stay on the 4th rank because all my pieces are defending these squares. So we have rook d2. I played queen to e6, trying to get away from the discovered attack on this knight. Rook to e3 comes in with the idea, I believe, of bringing the rook over to one of these 2 squares and trying to attack my king this way. I played bishop to c6, looking to remove the knight, and after rook to f3, my opponent kind of grants my wish. Is I take off the knight, c captures d5, and here I play queen to d6, just blockading this pawn. It is isolated, so I thought that my drawing chances are actually going to revolve around winning this pawn. Bishop to e3 comes in, and now my opponent is starting to see a little bit of time trouble. They're down to 11 minutes and 30 seconds from our original 90, whereas I'm sitting around 25 minutes. I play rook to c7, looking to double my rooks on the c-file. My opponent takes with the bishop, and here, to maintain defense here, I played rook captures c5. My opponent played queen captures b6. And I thought that I had found something really nice here with rook to b8. What I thought I had in the game is the only move to save the queen is queen a6. After which, the variation that I'd seen was rook c1 check, and after king to h2, e4 check, I thought was the winning variation. However, the queen is under attack, so I didn't even have that. And you can see that I just was not, this week was not a good week of calculation for me. But instead, my opponent plays rook captures f6, and this was very much a cold shower move. As I was like, oh, I might be losing. The best variation here that the engine comes up with is rook captures b7. After rook captures d6, then you have rook captures a5, holding on to this pawn. King to h2, bringing the king up, and then maybe a move like, rook to a4, going after this pawn. I thought, however, that my opponent might make a mistake in the endgame simply because I was a little bit higher rated, so I wanted to see what they could find. Is in this position, I played the move rook captures c1 check, king to h2, queen captures f6, queen captures b8 check, king to g7, and I had the idea of sacrificing this pawn here because I thought I had enough attackers on the king that I'd be able to find a checkmating threat. But what I missed is after queen captures a7, king to h6, my opponent has the beautiful defensive resource, queen to e3, which is a check. I can't trade the queens because these two pawns are going to run to victory. I'm already down 2 pawns. So my only move here is actually to go back to g7. My opponent here played g3, stopping the capture on h4, also stopping ideas of my pieces coming in. I played queen to d6 to try and stop this pawn from moving, and at this point, I had realized that I was completely lost, and I was just trying to defend the endgame and find maybe a perpetual check or hope that my opponent blunders. My opponent plays queen to b6, asking for a queen trade, which would inevitably win to a completely losing game, because even after a move like rook b1, all my opponent has to do is push this pawn, and there is simply nothing that I can do. And I have complete faith that my opponent Alex would win this game. But after all this, g3, queen d6, my opponent plays queen b6, so I played the move queen to f8 with the only idea of trying to get to f3 and potentially gain some kind of checkmate. So it's a little bit of hope chess. My opponent needed to defend against this threat, but instead they played move d6, at which point I play queen to f3, which now I am threatening checkmate in 1 unless my opponent can either checkmate me or they can draw by repetition. So after queen a7, I played king to g8, queen b8, king g7, and I was looking here for a long time to see if the move queen to c7 works. I don't believe it does, because after rook captures c7 and d captures c7, you actually have the move queen to c6. If our opponent tries to push the a6 pawn, you take this off. Our opponent can continue to try and push. We go here, and you enter this endgame queen versus rook with even pawns. And it should be a win for black, but there's still a little bit to be desired here. So after queen a7, king g8, and I realized my opponent was going to repeat the position. I shuffled my king. This is threefold repetition, and the game ends in a draw. So really, credit to Alex. Fantastically played game by him. This is one of the games I was really hoping to win since I'm the higher rated player in the group. But he did his prep. He was ready to face me, and he showed up to the board and played a fantastic game in which I wasn't better for a single move of the game. So this was not, the best week of the Lichess leagues for me. I ended up with 1.5 out of 2 games. I got just hung a full piece. I got smoked in the 45-45 game, and I was never better in the series game. But next week is a new week of chess. Every game is a new game, so hopefully we will do a little bit better then. And on that note, I will see you guys on the next day of the road to 2K.